The dorm's ancient air conditioner wheezed like a dying animal, a futile effort against the stifling August humidity that seeped into every corner of the room. My desk fan oscillated ineffectively between my sweat-damp neck and the half-graded freshman essays scattered across my desk. Each page felt like a heavy weight, impossible to ignore. Behind me, Liam sprawled on my bed, shirtless and glistening, scrolling through TikTok with his usual half-absent look. His scent, musky sweet, like overripe peaches after a summer rain, hung in the air, cloying and intoxicating. I tried to focus. I really did. But focus was impossible when Liam's presence invaded everything. The rustling of his sheets, the occasional low chuckle at something on his screen, the way the dim light from my desk lamp caught the sharp angles of his face, turning shadows into something almost sculptural. It had been this way all summer, ever since his breakup with Clara. At first, it was just late-night rants about her toxic vibes and how she'd stolen his favorite hoodie. Then it became pizza boxes and PlayStation marathons, his laughter echoing off the cinderblock walls. But somewhere between May and August, the energy shifted. The casual shoulder bumps lingered a second too long. His jokes about my professor vibes took on a sharper, teasing edge. He started stealing my hoodies, wearing them around the dorm like they were his, stretching the sleeves out as he pulled them over his knuckles. And now, here we were, trapped in a room that felt smaller every day, the air crackling with something neither of us dared name. "You're typing louder than my mom's knitting needles," Liam drawled, his voice lazy but edged with something playful. His legs tangled in my sheets, toes flexing against my pillow. He kicked the back of my chair lightly. "Take a break, man. You look like a ghost." I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I have 12 more papers on Wuthering Heights trauma tropes. Unless you want to explain to my advisor why I'm slacking off. Liam let out an exaggerated groan as the bed springs creaked. A moment later, his chin found its way to my shoulder, his breath warm against my skin, his chest pressing solidly against my back. I tensed. He was always close, always pushing limits, but never stepping over them. Until tonight. "Please," he breathed, his lips brushing the sensitive edge of my ear just barely. A shiver snaked down my spine. We'd played this game before, Liam weaponizing proximity, me pretending indifference. But tonight, everything felt different. Dangerous. The air between us thickened, charged. My pulse quickened, my grip tightening on my pen. I couldn't look at Liam. Not now, because I knew, deep down, it wasn't the papers or my dissertation committee that had me frozen in place. It was the memory of 2 weeks ago. He'd stumbled into the dorm after midnight, reeking of tequila and regret. "Why does everything feel so fucking empty?" He'd slurred, collapsing onto my bed. I'd sat stiffly beside him, my hand hovering awkwardly over his trembling shoulders. When he'd suddenly grabbed my wrist and pressed my palm to his chest, I jerked back like I'd been burned. "Don't," he'd muttered, rolling away. "Forget it." I hadn't forgotten. Now, his fingers traced the muscle of my forearm, deliberate and insistent. My skin prickled under his touch. "Your students can wait," Liam murmured, the usual smugness in his voice flickering. There was something unsteady beneath his words, something fragile. His breath hitched, a barely audible crack in his usual bravado. "I can't." My throat tightened. I wanted to pull away, to deny the rush of heat that swept through me. But Liam's presence anchored me in place. I swallowed hard. "You're being needy?" "Yeah." Liam's voice was a husky murmur, his lips grazing the hinge of my jaw. "Fix it." I squeezed my eyes shut, my chest tightening like a vice. It was unbearable, the heat of his body, the way he leaned into me as if daring me to move first. I didn't. I let my head tip back slightly, just enough that the space between us disappeared completely. A sharp inhale from Liam, barely perceptible. His fingers tightened against my arm. We were so young. It hit me all at once. The recklessness of this moment. The way desire and uncertainty blurred together at this age, turning everything into a confusing, desperate ache. I could feel his heart hammering against my shoulder, out of sync with mine, erratic, unsure. Liam was waiting. For what? I wasn't sure. Permission? Rejection? The air between us crackled, waiting to catch fire. The room was stifling, thick with August heat, but I wasn't sure if it was the air or the way Liam was looking at me. The flickering glow of my desk lamp cast jagged shadows on the walls, deepening the angles of his face, highlighting the tension in his jaw, the almost imperceptible tremor in his hands. Outside, life continued as it always had. Laughter from the courtyard, the distant hum of music from someone's Bluetooth speaker, the occasional slamming of doors in the dorm hall. But inside this room, the world had narrowed to just the two of us. Liam was close, so close I could count the freckles dusted across his nose, see the sheen of sweat clinging to his skin. His gym shorts hung low on his hips, his chest rising and falling unevenly, his usual cocky smirk absent. Instead, something unreadable flickered in his dark eyes, something just shy of fear. He swallowed hard, fingers twitching at his sides before balling into fists. I don't. He hesitated, exhaling sharply before shaking his head. Never mind. But his body told a different story. The way he swayed slightly toward me, the way his pupils dilated when I shifted, the way his breath hitched when my hand ghosted near his waist. He was battling something inside himself, something that had been simmering between us for months. I knew because I was battling it too. Liam, I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. His gaze snapped to mine, and for a moment I thought he was going to step back, make a joke, brush this whole thing off like it was nothing. But instead, he exhaled shakily and closed the distance between us, his fingers curling around the hem of my shirt. My pulse stuttered. He trailed off, looking away, jaw tightening. I swallowed hard. I know. His fingers flexed against the fabric, his knuckles brushing my stomach. The touch was barely there, but it sent a jolt through me, a slow-building ache that pooled low in my gut. His breath ghosted over my collarbone as he leaned in, his lips parting slightly, like he was about to say something. Instead, he hesitated, as if waiting for me to pull away. I didn't. Instead, I reached out, threading my fingers through his hair, letting the soft strands slip between them. Liam let out a shaky exhale, his forehead pressing against my shoulder, his body suddenly unsteady. I don't know what I'm doing, he admitted, so quietly I almost didn't hear him. Something tightened in my chest. It's okay, I murmured, brushing my thumb over the back of his neck. Neither do I. He let out a breathless laugh, a short, shaky thing. Then slowly, hesitantly, he tilted his head up, his nose brushing against my jaw. The air between us felt charged, heavy. Then he kissed me. It wasn't careful or soft. It was desperate, like he'd been holding himself back for too long and had finally lost the fight. His hands found my face, fingers pressing into my jaw, thumbs sweeping over my cheekbones. His mouth was warm, urgent, and I could feel his pulse hammering just as wildly as mine. I groaned against his lips, my hands finding his waist, his skin burning beneath my fingertips. He shuddered at the touch, his grip tightening like he was afraid I'd disappear. The bed creaked beneath us as we stumbled back onto it, my back hitting the mattress as Liam hovered over me, his breath uneven. He braced himself on either side of me, muscles tense, his body radiating heat. I let my hands trail up his sides, feeling the way his stomach muscles clenched beneath my touch. He bit his lip, eyes dark and searching, as if waiting for me to tell him to stop. I wouldn't. I couldn't. Instead, I pulled him down, capturing his lips again. He let out a sharp breath, his hands finding my wrists, pinning them against the mattress. His grip was firm, but not rough, like he needed to ground himself, like he needed something solid to hold on to. His mouth moved to my jaw, my neck, his breath hot against my skin. Every touch left a trail of fire in its wake. Every shift of his body against mine sent another pulse of heat through me. Liam. I breathed, my fingers tightening around his wrists. He tensed slightly, his forehead pressing into my shoulder. He cut himself off, his voice unsteady. I don't want to think tonight. I swallowed, chest tightening. Then don't, I murmured, tilting his chin up so our eyes met. Just be here. Something flickered in his expression. Something fragile. Something hesitant. Then slowly he nodded, and for the first time, he let go. His lips met mine again, softer this time, less frantic, more certain. His hands moved, trailing over my arms, my sides, his touch slow and deliberate. He wasn't just reaching for me, he was memorizing me. I let my own hands explore in return, tracing the curve of his back, the sharp lines of his shoulder blades, the dip of his spine. Every touch made him shiver, made him press closer, like he wanted to disappear into me entirely. I understood the feeling. Liam let out a quiet noise when my fingers dipped lower, his body reacting before his brain could catch up. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, his breath ragged. Ethan, he murmured against my skin. I hummed in response, running my fingers up his back, feeling the way he trembled under my touch. I don't. He hesitated, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't want this to be a mistake. I froze, my chest tightening. It won't be, I said quietly. Liam exhaled, nodding slightly, but I could still feel the tension in his shoulders. He was still afraid of what this meant, afraid of what came after. I didn't have the answers, but right now in this moment, none of that mattered. I pulled him closer, kissing him slow, deep, letting him feel the certainty in the way I touched him, in the way I wanted him. Liam sighed into the kiss, his body relaxing against mine, the weight of his hesitation melting away. And for tonight, that was enough. Noah stood frozen in the doorway, his gym bag slipping from his shoulder, a handful of brightly colored items spilling across the floor like confetti at the world's most awkward party. One rolled to a stop against his sneaker, glowing neon pink under the desk lamp. The absurdity of the moment hit us all at once. A chaotic snapshot of embarrassment, interrupted plans, and Sylvia Plath. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. Liam's back was turned, his shirt clinging to him as he caught his breath, his hands still gripping the edge of the desk. My own face burned as I quickly adjusted my clothes, trying to salvage some semblance of dignity. The silence was thick, oppressive, like the air before a storm. Noah's Adam's apple bobbed, his gaze darting between Liam and me, his brain clearly struggling to process the scene. Liam scrambled backwards so fast that he nearly knocked me over. Fuck. Noah, it's not what it looks like. Noah finished weakly, his voice cracking. Because it looks like, yeah. We were wrestling. Liam blurted, his voice pitching higher than usual. I choked on a laugh. Wrestling? Yeah, like MMA training. Liam gestured wildly at me, his biceps flexing in a way that undermined his words. He's teaching me literary grappling techniques. Noah's gaze dropped to the bed, where the sheets were tangled and a few stray items lay scattered. His eyes widened slightly, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he rubbed his face, exhaling a long breath that smelled faintly of protein powder and secondhand embarrassment. Right? Noah said slowly, his voice dripping with disbelief. And the noises I heard? Combat, grunts, Liam whispered, his face turning beet red. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. It felt like a scene from a bad sitcom, except no one was laughing. Even the air conditioner seemed to wheeze in sympathy. Noah shook his head, his face flushing. Dude, you're literally still sitting in his lap. Liam looked down. He was, in fact, still perched awkwardly on the edge of the bed, his legs tangled in the sheets. With a yelp, he launched himself across the room, crashing into the bookshelf. Sylvia Plath's Ariel toppled onto his head, fluttering open to Lady Lazarus as if the universe itself were mocking us. Shit! Shit! Liam clutched his scalp, eyes wide in panic. This isn't. We weren't. I found my voice, desperation rising in my chest. Noah, listen. Nope. Noah threw up his hands, his face bright red. I'm gonna go. Reorganize the communal fridge. For 3 hours. He backed out of the room, his voice strained. Carry on with your academic activities. The door slammed behind him. For a full 10 seconds, Liam stood frozen against the wall, his back pressed to the cool wood, unmoving. I watched, my chest tightening, as a ladybug slowly crawled across the valley between his shoulder blades. A surreal, absurdly poetic touch that I would later resent, but for now, it felt almost fitting. This delicate, slow-moving thing in the chaos of everything else. Well, I croaked, the awkwardness of the situation weighing down on me, making my voice feel thick and foreign. That happened. Liam didn't move, his body frozen against the wall, eyes closed, as if trying to will himself out of existence. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and distant, but there was an edge of panic beneath it. He'll tell everyone. I reached for my shirt, trying to make sense of the moment, of the mess we were now standing in. Noah's not a jerk, Liam. He won't tell anyone. Liam's laugh was harsh, bitter. You really think so? He turned slightly, his back still to me, shoulders drawn in tight, as if making himself smaller. He's got a mouth on him. Remember when he told the whole floor about Jess's toe fungus? This isn't toe fungus. No, it's worse. He scrubbed a hand over his face, his voice rising. It's fuck. It's us, Ethan. You think people won't care? You think they won't talk? I stood, my legs shaky, and took a step toward him. Let them talk. Easy for you to say, he muttered, finally turning to face me. His eyes were bloodshot, his lower lip trembling. You're not the one who's gonna get called names in the locker room. You're not the one who's gonna have to explain this to your dad. The words hung in the air like a grenade. I flinched. Liam, don't. He held up a hand, his voice breaking. Just don't. The silence that followed was worse than the interruption. I could hear the muffled bass of someone's music down the hall, the drip of the broken sink in the bathroom. Liam's breathing hitched, and for a moment, I thought he might cry. Instead, he bent down, picked up his shirt, and yanked it on with jerky, angry motions. Where are you going? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Out. Liam, wait. He paused at the door, his hand on the knob. What? Ethan, what's left to say? That this was a mistake? That we'll figure it out? He laughed, hollow and cold. We're not figuring out shit. We're just messing up. And now the whole world's gonna know. The door slammed again, harder this time. I sank onto the bed, the sheets still warm from his body. The ladybug had reached the base of Liam's discarded water bottle, its tiny wings fluttering uselessly against the plastic. I thought about texting him, about chasing him down, but my phone buzzed before I could move. A message from Noah. You are welcome for the privacy. Also, please sanitize the bed. Paychecks. Attached was a blurry Polaroid of Liam mid-launch off my lap, his face a mask of pure panic, my own shirt halfway over my head. The caption, Roommate MMA Champs 2023, training for the closet division. I didn't laugh, but I didn't delete it either. Liam stood against the wall, his back pressed to the cool wood, unmoving. I watched, my chest tightening, as a ladybug slowly crawled across the valley between his shoulder blades. It was a surreal, absurdly poetic touch that I would later resent, but for now, it felt almost fitting. This delicate, slow-moving thing in the chaos of everything else. I didn't know if I was more disturbed by the intrusion or the way everything between us had suddenly become so real. I wanted to laugh, but the tension in the room was too heavy for that. Well, I croaked, the awkwardness of the situation weighing down on me, making my voice feel thick and foreign. That happened. Liam didn't move, his body frozen against the wall, eyes closed, as if trying to will himself out of existence. He finally spoke, voice low and distant, but there was an edge of panic beneath it. "He'll tell everyone." I reached for my shirt, trying to make sense of the moment, of the mess we were now standing in. "Noah's not a jerk, Liam. He won't tell anyone." Liam's laugh was harsh, bitter. "You really think so?" He turned slightly, his back still to me, shoulders drawn in tight, as if making himself smaller. "He's got a mouth on him." My throat tightened, but I held my ground. "Maybe, but I don't think he's going to make your life harder for it. This, whatever it is between us, it's not anyone else's business." My voice softened, the weight of our silence pulling at me. "We'll figure this out." Liam's breath hitched, and for a moment, I thought he was going to break, collapse into some vulnerability that neither of us was ready for. But he just scrubbed a hand through his hair, his fingers trembling. "What if I don't know how?" he asked, so quietly it almost got lost in the stillness of the room. "What if I'm not ready for this?" I didn't answer right away, unsure how to give voice to the storm that raged in my chest. My mind screamed at me to hold on to control, but the truth was, everything about this, about Liam, felt like it was slipping through my fingers. "You don't have to have it all figured out," I said at last, my voice steady despite the uncertainty that lingered between us. "No one does. We're just two people trying to navigate this, whatever it is, trying to figure out how to be what we are together." Liam's head tilted back, eyes fixed on the ceiling like he could find an answer up there. His jaw clenched, the muscles in his neck taut. "I've never been this open with anyone before," he admitted, the words seeming to take more out of him than he intended. "I don't know what I'm supposed to feel." I moved closer then, stepping lightly on the floorboards to avoid the papers that had scattered. I stood a few feet away from Liam, close enough to feel the heat of his body, but not touching, because touching now would be something deeper, something that might make the fragile understanding between us shatter like glass. "You don't have to know right now," I replied, my voice low but firm. "I'm not asking for anything more than this, us, figuring it out. But I need you to understand one thing, Liam." I reached out, taking a step closer until we were almost within touching distance. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Not for this. Not for you." Liam's gaze flickered to me, but then his eyes dropped, staring at the floor, at his own hands, flexing and curling with the tension that had yet to find a release. He stood like he might leave, but something held him back, something unspoken between us. His lips parted, but no words came out. The silence hung heavy, and I realized, sometimes the most difficult part of intimacy wasn't the touches or the proximity, but the rawness of showing up, of staying, even when the future was unclear. Then, Liam finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper, but with something steady, something he hadn't had before. "You sure you want this? Want me?" My chest tightened at the question, the depth of it hitting me like a physical blow. I nodded, my eyes not leaving Liam's face. "Yeah, I do. Liam's lips twitched in something resembling a smile, but it was fragile, still unsure, like he didn't quite know how to wear it. He stepped forward, closing the space between us, and for a moment, it felt like the entire world had narrowed to the two of us standing in that room, amidst the echoes of our fears and desires. I don't know how to be this, Liam murmured, his breath warm against my ear. But I'll try. I'll try, if you'll teach me. I exhaled a shaky breath, my heart pounding in my chest as I wrapped my arms around Liam's shoulders. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But this was real. And that was all that mattered. The walk of shame. When the sun rose the next morning, Noah returned to find us both asleep on my bed, fully clothed, tangled together like parentheses. Awkward, but warm, like something new was just beginning to form between us. He stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at the two of us, before pulling out his Polaroid camera, taking a photo, and taping it to the fridge with a caption that made me groan. Roommate MMA Champs 2023. When Liam saw it later that morning, he flushed a deep shade of red, but something about it, about the absurdity of it all, made him leave it there. He didn't take it down. Instead, he turned to me, giving me a look. One that told me, without words, that maybe, just maybe, we could survive whatever came.